Hi, everybody. It's Keir here, Team Librarian, Buffalo City County Library District. I always mess up because so many words. Anyway, so it's time for my weekly book talk. And before I get to the book, I just wanted to say something. If there's something I will continue to learn throughout my life, it's how little I know. I think that's a great thing. Why do I start with that thought? Well, today I'm introducing a graphic memoir called Banned Book Club. Sorry, here it is. It is written by Kim Hyun-suk and Eric Estrada and drawn by Ko Hyung-ju. Let me just say right now to all the Korean American or Korean people that might be watching, I want to apologize for my poor pronunciation of the names. So, why this book? I actually put this book on hold without ever having seen it or knowing what it was about. I'm just drawn to books about banned books. So it's actually set in 1983 South Korea. And I quickly realized that I knew nothing about either the long-term history or the short-term history of South Korea, other than the fact that the war in Korea, which the U.S. was involved in, the U.S. involvement was in large part motivated by the American sort of armed as well as cultural war on communism. I knew that, and I knew that at present, South Korea is a well-functioning democratic society. That's pretty much what I knew, and I knew a little bit about the culture of some Korean Americans, because I have a bunch of Korean American friends in college, but really I knew nothing. And I had no idea that in 1983, Korea was governed by a brutal military regime that entrenched its power through censorship, torture, and the murder and imprisonment of protesters. I didn't know any of this history until I read this book. So this is actually a memoir, but I just want to make clear, on the last page is written, the ingredients for this book were true stories from a network of friends over the course of 40 years. For the privacy and safety of our subjects, we sliced, diced, and blended them into one narrative starring a handful of amalgamated characters at a fictional university. So it's a memoir, but they've changed. It's not like exactly the people, exactly where they were, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Which makes sense because since then, things got better, and then they had a president who was insanely corrupt and had to be impeached and imprisoned. I mean, things have been up and down, and this is during my lifetime. I don't have a clue. And granted, I was a very tiny person at the time, but still, my knowledge of what's gone on in South Korea in recent history was essentially nil. And so that was eye-opening. Granted, my knowledge of history around the world is minuscule. Part of that has to do with my education, and part of that has to do with there's so much history and so much world, and if I had become a historian, maybe I could have tackled it, but I didn't. So anyway, on to the book. The memoir recalls the experience of Hyun Suk as she begins university. And beginning university, she's had to sort of convince her parents to even allow her to go to university. She worked a second job in addition to her job at the family restaurant to save the money to afford it. And essentially, like, what society generally thinks of as university are just a bunch of protesters. That's especially what her mother thinks. So she has to convince them to allow her to go. And she goes to a local university. She takes the bus there and lives at home. But she convinces them that she genuinely wants to learn, and she's going to be studying English language and literature. So the book starts off with that sort of setup, and it's her first day, and she's sort of nervously setting out. And she's taking the bus. She gets to the university, and lo and behold, protesters everywhere, police everywhere in riot gear. It's intense. So she sort of fights her way through to get to her sort of orientation. Right? She's late. So she has to announce herself in front of everyone. It's embarrassing. And so she gets seated next to an English literature professor who tells her that he'll help keep her out of trouble. And this guy is kind of an interesting character. He seems intellectually aware. Of the reasons for protest, as comes through in one particular lecture. He's also sort of creepy, like sexual manipulator. We also find out. So anyway, Hyun Suk is there to study, and so and during that orientation, I don't know if it was the president or dean or something, but he sort of condemns, the craziness outside, and the police are supposed to be taking care of it. And he's sort of saying, if they're bored with their studies, they should busy themselves with extracurricular activities. And so anyway, she joins the. Sorry, I'm so tired right now. I got enough sleep this week, so I have notes that I'm looking down at, as usual. So she joins the masked folk dance team, right? And she's drumming in its performance. When she sees that it's recreation of a 600-year-old Korean folktale, is actually being used as a political allegory in a way she didn't expect, and that it's been sort of in coordination with the student protesters. And that's like her first sort of moment of seeing what the university tries to keep very separate, like coming together, right? So politics had not been a part of her life. She and her family have had to work very hard. It's been the dream of her father's to open this restaurant. There's a whole backstory there that is very important. I'm not actually going to touch on it much, but it plays definitely an important role. And so anyway, someone in the dance group, he's also the editor of the school newspaper. His name is Hoon, I think. Anyway, he invites her to join a reading club. And given that she loves to read, she reads tons all the time, so she's excited. She's like, absolutely. And so she brings her copy of The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne, which is what she's reading at the moment, to the reading group. And she quickly realizes that this was not the kind of reading group she thought it was. They're not reading great novels or, she comes in and she sort of she introduces herself and says, I'm reading this letter, and they go around, and everyone else is reading essentially politically left revolutionary books. And the discussion they're having is of a book that they've all read, at least discussing a chapter they've all read of, that is a banned book by a South Korean author who's been imprisoned. And she's she's heard about this banned book club where everyone got thrown in jail. And so she is just terrified. She has a scholarship at the university. She's trying to live up to her parents' expectations. She's never been involved in or interested in politics, and she sort of freaks out. She's like, "This is not what I signed up for," and she starts to take off. And one of the members says to her, "It was totally unfair of Hoon to invite you to this without explaining what it was, but when you're ready to wake up, please get in touch with me." And so she goes home. She's totally freaked out by this. She goes home. And later she is at a lecture about Shakespeare. And she knows a lot more about Shakespeare than this sort of mean girl sitting next to her who's, "I hate politics, I hate protesters," But part of the lecture is about how slyly political some of Shakespeare's plays really were, particularly the histories. And also the fact that what we now consider as, Shakespeare's canon is actually a collection of two sort of sets of plays, one of which was performed in public and would not piss off people in power. And there were other plays that were only sort of performed underground to sort of activist audiences. And now they're all together because we don't live in that time. We don't recognize the difference. But, and this is sort of, fascinating thing for her to learn, especially given what she's but recently experienced with folk dance. And it's similar, right? So, she's thinking about it, and she goes back to the reading group, and she begins participating in the learning that it fosters. And she learns, and she makes all these friends from this diverse group of people who are in the group. One of whom is a pacifist poet who has never even been to a protest. And from them, she learns a lot about the recent history of her country that she didn't know because it was all censored. There is a story, a sort of official story of how South Korea fought off this invasion from China. And it's completely made up. What actually happened there was that the Korean military slaughtered its own people, protesters, slaughtered and imprisoned protesters. It's a horrific thing. But in order to have an enemy, you can always sort of, build your national pride by having an enemy against which to focus. So that was something that they had done, and she's shocked by this. She thought it was an invasion, and it was this little conflict, and they kept the border, et cetera, et cetera. But actually, it was this horrific part of their history. And so she begins to join protests, and to help prepare Molotov cocktails for the protests. And later, there's sort of an intense moment where the girl at whose home they've had their reading club, the home gets raided. She's lucky to get away. Her mother did not know that she was doing this. So her mother goes through all of her stuff and finds all of this stuff, kicks her out. She loses her family. But she ends up not in prison. But around the same time, the pacifist poet, who's never been at a protest, he's walking like across campus, and a policeman has this picture of a protester who like a little bit looks like him. I mean, the protester has, a mask on, but he wears the same glasses, and they have vaguely the same hair. But the guy in the picture is sort of like bigger, and the poet's this really skinny guy. It's clearly not the same person, but they grab him saying he is the same person. They arrest him. And, they're basically torturing him, trying to give up names and all that sort of stuff. And he just keeps writing poems about hope. And they say, write a confession. And they'll give him a pen, and he'll just write poems about hope. And they're getting frustrated as hell, But everyone else is dealing with this. This is the one guy who never should have gotten arrested. I mean, yes, he was reading the banned books, but he wasn't out there protesting. He wasn't on the front lines like everybody else was. And in the aftermath of this, the reading group is starting to fracture. Well, the editor of the school paper, also the school paper is funny because it's definitely censored, and then he writes his own paper at home. But anyway, he takes on this weird sort of I need to protect everyone. We've got to break up this group, and everyone's like, shut up! I can protect myself. You don't have to protect me. But it's sort of at that moment, he's feeling responsible for this guy getting arrested, and he's trying to break it up and take the heat on himself. It's one of the moments in which feminism plays a really interesting part in this book. But as this is happening, there's a young man sort of on the outer circle of their group of friends who Hyun soon sees at the police station, and he's not being tortured or anything. So they figure out he's a spy. And also around the same time, Special Agent OK, who's this military guy trying to break up the university protest movement, calls Hyun Soon's restaurant and says he's going to come to the restaurant and talk to her and her parents. She freaks out. She says, no. And, her parents there. So she's trying to hide who it is. And she's like, oh, no, let's meet at the cafe. So she meets them at the cafe. And it's pretty hilarious because she just sort of snowballs him, makes him look like a fool, and gets away and it's fine. But proving that she can take care of herself. And things sort of progress from there, sort of building to intensity as the editor is angry and feels guilty. And anyway, I'm not going to tell you everything that happens, but it's definitely scary and intense. And Hyun Soon shows cleverness and bravery. And then at the end of the book, there's a reunion. And that's quite interesting too, because the younger students are protesting. Because though after our main characters have been protesting, that finally that regime was overthrown and they do get a democracy. And for a while they have solid democracy, but then they get another president who's totally corrupt, like rife with corruption, and so they're all protesting this president. And so the now older characters are sort of talking to the younger characters and talking about the nature of history and protest and et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, it's a really cool story. It's got really interesting commentary on feminism and protest. The art is also awesome. So the cover is pretty cool. You can see the protest behind her. She's got her book. Let's see. But this is her sort of freaking out. The first time she goes to the reading group. And then I marked here, this is where the ladies are making the Molotov cocktails. And they throw one and it's not right. They have to get the ingredients right. They go out like into the woods to make them. Here's right after, it's she who is the poet who's been arrested, and this is one of the members of the club by himself before everyone's rallied around him. He's just alone protesting for him. But quite quickly, people join. So it's a fascinating book. I love graphic novels, and the art is awesome. It's black and white. It's great art. It's a fascinating story. I learned a lot about South Korea, and it was a really interesting sort of look inside a protest movement that isn't necessarily very secret, because the regime that they're fighting against is so powerful and so violent. I've been involved in a lot of protesting, and we took sort of obvious security. We took security in sort of obvious ways to keep private, but I mean, this nothing like this, and it's pretty new. Came out in March, so I definitely recommend it. I super enjoyed it, and yeah, so that is my book talk today. I'm so tired. I have not been sleeping enough. And I had a virtual conference today, so I had to come in a lot earlier than usual, and I'm staying late. It's gonna be a long day, but 5:30. If people come, I've got an outdoor program scheduled. If any teens come to hang out, that would be awesome. I've got some stuff to do that's fun. And I hope some teens come. I realize it's not, it's a beautiful day. I realize it's not as good as coming to our space, because the space is yours. And I do realize that makes a big difference. That said, when June starts, we can start having hangouts in your space. And I can start earning the trust of the teens and people who come to our hangouts. I do not believe I have it because I don't know you, and why would you trust me if you don't know me? But I think I can earn it. Maybe, is that overconfident? I believe I can, and I'm committed to it. Anyway, take care of yourselves, okay? There's a light at the end of this tunnel. We're coming out of it. Hopefully you guys can get vaccines now. Get your vaccines, okay? Get vaccinated. You just feel better when you're vaccinated. Even though you wish everyone were vaccinated, you feel better being vaccinated. It's like some weight is off your shoulders, not all of it, because it's going to take a long time for that weight to lift. But it does feel like a little bit of weight is lifted when you're vaccinated. So now that it's allowed for teenagers to get the vaccines, get them. My niece just got her first one. She's 13. So, yeah, get them. And take care of yourselves. And I mean that in your hearts and your minds. If you're not doing well, ask for help. If you don't feel like there's anyone you can ask for help, call. Call a crisis line. I put bookmarks in the Kits to Go. There are lots of different crisis lines. If you've gotten a Kit to Go and you've seen the bookmarks, there are lots of them. Whatever your identity, there's probably one, I hope, maybe, for you. But please take care of yourselves. We're going to emerge from this. It's not going to be easy emerging from it too. It's going to be weird. When I don't wear my mask, I feel naked. It's nice to breathe without it, but I still feel naked. And I wear it at work because while I'm vaccinated, I can still pass it, and I don't want to get anyone sick who's not vaccinated. So for now, I'm still wearing it unless I'm actually in the office and everyone around me is vaccinated. But take care of yourselves in every possible way. Come out on Thursdays, 5:30, Turtle Park. You can meet me. I can try and show you that I'm not a total write-off, not a sucker, not somebody to ignore. You can ignore me, that's okay. I value your voice. I'll fight for you. And yeah. Okay, take care. I'm just babbling now because I'm tired. I'll see you again virtually if you check in. Okay, bye-bye.